Welcome back to my devlog on the road to making a standalone VR game. In this episode, I'll continue showing the first prototype enemy, focusing more on systems used for its attacks. Last time I showed off how I handled the movement systems for the prototype enemy, also known as Long Hair Bob. The decision-making system that handles the movement is also used for storing and handling the available actions. It's a collection of both the movement and attack actions that the enemy can perform, which will be then selected at random whenever it has recovered from the previous action. Recovery in this context just means when the previous animation has finished and the system has reset all the necessary variables so that it's ready to perform a new action. However, for the type of game I want to make next, relying on complete randomness to decide what enemy will do is not great. In my previous work, I gave bosses a playlist of attack patterns from which it could choose at random anytime it took damage. This was my way to avoid complete randomness when relying purely on animated logic. I wanted to do something more intelligent this time with better interaction and reaction to the player. So I gave each potential action a value that determines its probability of being picked. This value, better referred to as a weight, changes based on several factors such as the enemy's previous action, distance from the player's current action, and so on. The enemy is constantly monitoring these in the background and adjusting the weights of every action per frame. An easy way to show this off is if I move further away from it, where it is highly likely to resort to ranged attacks. I added a visible label above the enemy so I can see what distance it classes itself in relation to the player. I also used this system to prevent an action being spammed constantly, such as movement actions. This would avoid edge cases in decision making, where an enemy just picks movement actions 10 times in a row, instead of attacking the player. This system is still quite early and something I want to continue expanding on, such as giving enemies a set of moods that further edit the weights of each action. For example, triggering a berserk state, where it prioritizes aggressive behavior for a period of time, but in a way that mixes with the other conditions affecting each weight. Moving on to the actual attacks themselves, I intentionally added ones that would force me to need unique logic to handle each one, instead of making several attacks that fit the same type of logic, because that wouldn't do me any favors in this kind of learning phase. And variety in attack styles is always a good step to creating interesting enemies. So first off, you have the generic stop movement do attack, which requires a nav agent to stop as well as disabling the rotation tracking of the enemy, and then resuming it once done. This is so that it doesn't rotate mid-animation of the attack, which can be very unfair to the player. I also did a second version of this where I thought it'd be kind of fun to just have it spin around too. Next, there is a moving combo attack where the attack animation itself drives the nav agent forward using the hybrid nav system that I settled on. The movement systems were already in place to prevent it from going through obstacles or taking a long journey to get to the other side of the wall, so this is pretty simple. I created a long-range projectile attack that relies on particle systems for dealing damage. This one was simple for me since I've already done it on previous projects. The rotation disabling for this attack was fun to figure out, since I wanted to be precise right down to the frame, allowing it to track the player whilst charging up the attack and then freezing rotation the moment it enters the bullet firing state. I definitely want to include bullet hell-like abilities in my future game for sure. Not as a primary focus, but more as an attack some enemies are capable of. Another type of attack I wanted to make was letting it pick the nearest acceptable location to perform a more arena interactive move. For this, I went with a simple attack animation, just so I could focus on the location finding logic. So it'll just do a jump and a slam into a shockwave attack, but the key thing here is how it detects the ideal location. I'll definitely revisit and improve this, since I do want the option to have the enemy jump really quick to its destination, instead of taking its time walking there. Seeing all this in action was great. I could see how far I've come from previous projects, and I was so excited to continue developing more enemy systems. I was really inspired by the progress I had made with the enemy that I ended up making more attack types, so I have working examples that I can just plug and play for any enemy that I make going forward. Here I made a laser beam that reacts to obstacles and put in some extra effort into the particles to leave a simple trail behind too. These next set of attacks are things that I wanted to do in my previous work, such as homing missiles. And I remember giving up on these during development of my previous project because it was completely outside of my skill set. as I was very dependent on animators and particle effects. So I really wanted to learn how to actually create one for real this time. And I ended up surprising myself with how quickly I created these, if I'm being honest. Not being limited now to just animators and particle settings really does wonders. So with these homing missiles, I made them easy to customize so I can set the duration of both the missile launch phase, where it kind of rises up, not targeting the player, and then the tracking phase, where it comes back down, targeting the player. Just as it gets close to hitting the player, it stops locking on, giving the player a chance to dodge. If I didn't add that in, the missile would always hit no matter what, which would be unfair. These 3 modes or phases of the homing missile are completely customizable with the variables that I have set up. I then created more variations of this homing missile, such as this mortar styled ability where it tracks the player's ground position and then locks in after a specific amount of time, sending a missile to that location. This is pretty simple, but most of the complexity or learning process with this was figuring out how to make the AoE warning target on the floor stick to the ground. Because it was tracking the player's base, if the player jumps and it locks on mid-air, I had a floating warning icon in the air and the missile would go towards that spot. So I had to understand how to change the vector values of the lock-on area and force it to the ground. The last variation that I made was a combo of magic missiles that are launched in staggered delays. So this is quite common in like games with magic or even mecha games where they launch tons and tons of missiles that then home in at sort of a staggered delay from each other. This was really fun to figure out. Definitely a tougher one to dodge though compared to the previous 2. But I'm looking forward to be able to use this in the game that I make. So that covers everything that I did on the attack logic and how it fits into the enemy's navigation systems. And there's always room for more types of attacks. So I'll definitely continue creating new attacks further down the line. But for the purpose of this video, I think this is a nice cut-off point because next month I'll definitely go over the more smaller modular systems. So there'll be a lot more variation what I show next month. Such as the enemy health bar and even a stagger system that I made. So yeah, I hope you look forward to that. And if you enjoyed this, please leave a like, subscribe, and leave a comment as well so I know how many people are watching and enjoying this. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bullet Time Agent is coming to Steam and Metastore later this year. 2 of my close friends over at Sci-Fi Studios are handling the port to both pcvr and Quest. It'll also support desktop play as well. Please show some love and support by giving that game a wishlist on Steam. Link is in the description, and it'll help a lot with giving the game visibility as it gets close to launch.